How's it going? Good. All right. Just a little side note here. Anybody watching that drummer back there? My man Jed. Flipping the sticks and look, this is how I just learned something today. This is how you know it's on. During the third song, he took his glasses off and he was like, let's go. Let's get it. So if you ever see the glasses come off, you know it's about to be fun. Well, that was, okay. All right. Now we need to talk about important stuff. You know, we'll have the ushers come on down. We'll go ahead and pray over the offering. What I want to do real quick is remind you of something. Look, it's the summertime, right? And we're not going to act like people don't go on vacation. So I'm going to repeat something that was said a few weeks ago, but I want to repeat it because it's important. One of the things that happened, you remember we took up that huge offering with the hurricane, right? And we've talked about this a few times, and we were able to give away $200,000 in one weekend. It's crazy. $100,000 went to World Hope. We were able to help build or put in a desalination plant in the Caribbean after one of the hurricanes, and then $100,000 went to Samaritan's Purse. Well, a couple weeks ago, Samaritan's Purse came here to talk with us because, they're just kind of showing their appreciation. And when it's a nonprofit that lives off of donations, that's what you do. You go thank people who gave you money, right? And so they came to hang out with us a little bit, and they let us know that we fielded 2 out of the 5 teams that they put in Houston through our donations that they put in Houston after Hurricane Harvey. That's a big deal. And that's why I want to repeat it in case some of y'all didn't hear. You realize that, well, I mean, it's not a golf match, people. Like, can we get a little bit of, that's right. God at least deserves Tiger Woods level. You hear what I'm saying? All right. 40% of the teams in Houston were fielded by your donation. That's a big deal. Through Samaritan's Purse. Obviously not 40% of all the teams, but the ones through Samaritan's Purse were. So that's amazing. You need to be proud of yourselves. You need to be proud of your church. You need to be proud of your God, right? Ultimately, all glory goes to God. So let me pray real quick and we'll keep moving. Dear Lord, thank you for just the opportunity to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to give. I pray that you bless this time in the service. I know it's not the exciting time, but God, I pray that you bless this time and that you multiply it just over and over again, and that the dollars that come in today would not represent the impact that you're going to make, but that the impact you're going to make is going to be so much greater. Lord, we just thank you for this opportunity and for this time and for this church. Amen. All right. So it's summertime. It's July. Yeah. You know what? I'll tell you. Okay, the one person that cheered, she's like in high school. Just so you know. She was one of my students in the youth group back in the day. So here's the deal. This is what happens if you've been here for a while. You know the drill. In July, typically Pastor Michael takes some time off of preaching, and you get us. You get the young guys. So last week you had Pastor Logan. I always hate preaching the week after Logan preaches, because all you love Logan and you hug him and he makes you all get all up in your feelings. And then I have to come up. You know? I don't need your pity. So look, I appreciate it. Look, here's the deal. This is the way it works. We do it this way for a couple of reasons. I don't know if you know this. Pastor Mike has like 8 jobs. All right, so I'm going to list them for you only so that you can understand kind of the deal. And I didn't put this all together until a couple months ago when he started writing it up on a board. And I was like, well, you should sleep more. So this is what we got. He's on the general board of the Wesleyan Church, which is not a full-time job, obviously, but it takes up a couple weeks out of the year. Probably about 4 weeks out of the year that takes up. And then you have the Southern Wesleyan University Board of Trustees. Again, it takes up about four weeks out of the year. He's actually the vice chairman of that board. So that's kind of cool. That's where he graduated from. He writes books. He's been writing about 2 a year for a while. We haven't had one come out yet this year, but we're going to have another one coming eventually, I believe. But we started writing through Wesleyan Publishing House now, which is, it's a publisher that we're using now. When we used to produce them all in-house, that tightens up the timelines. When we produce them in-house, we do whatever we want, whenever we want, right? But when you start using a publisher, it tightens up timelines. So you have that. He teaches leadership and church consulting a lot of the time of the year. He's done that a lot less this year because the other things have gotten crazy. It just happened 2 weeks ago. He's the leader of this district of the Wesleyan Church now. He's one of them. There's a team of 5, but he's the chairman of that team. So he's added a ton to that. He also oversees this church, right? Which, with all of those other things going on, what happens is he makes the big decisions and we make the day-to-day run, And then he also oversees New Life Network. So that's all of our planted churches and video campuses and things like that. That's a lot going on, right? So what we do is we give him July to breathe on the weekends, He's still working. He bugged the crap out of me the other day through email. It's crazy. He sent me like 4 emails in a row, And he was texting me last night about the sermon, like, hey, do this, hey, don't do that, And, he's still working. Trust me, but he's taking a break on the weekends. I'm not sure which campus he visited this week. I believe he went to Calvert. It was up in the air between Calvert and the Alexandria campus. So that's all the stuff he's kind of doing. That's why we give him this time off. And then the other thing is, it's a blessing for us to get a chance to preach. So I just want to thank you for that. I don't know if you've unpacked all this, but there's only one stage. So there's only one guy that gets to preach most weeks, and he's real good. And we don't ask him not to most, ever. He does what he wants, And but what that means is we got a lot of younger guys on staff, and we got a lot of talented younger guys. Pastor Logan preached last week. Pastor Brandon preached the week before. Pastor Jordan preached in the Dome last week. We got a lot of really talented guys that don't get to preach very often. So this is just a blessing to be able to do this. Again, we thank you for that. And with that, I'm going to get moving, but I just want to say thank you. You guys are awesome. And I just love working here and being able to work with you. It's great, all right? All right, so we're talking about the life of Elisha, and I want to give you a couple little disclaimers on this sermon. First of all, it might come off a little disjointed at first. Just roll with me, all right? The problem is we're talking about Elisha, and the big stories in Elisha's life, it's a lot of miracles that happened that God allowed him to perform. So if we preach them straight up every time, I'm preaching a miracle sermon to you for 6 weeks, right? And it's always nice to get a halftime speech. You know what I'm saying? Anybody ever play sports and you're getting your tail whooped at halftime? And some people get fired up and you get the halftime speech. Let's go, we can do it. Blah, blah, blah. Well, it's always nice to get the halftime speech, and that's kind of what a miracle sermon is. It's a halftime speech. God's going to come through for you. But to do that 6 weeks in a row just wouldn't be fun for anybody, right? So what we decided, or at least what I decided to do on this sermon, is to take it and pull 3 lessons that we can kind of take from this story out of it, right? So if it comes across just a little bit disjointed, it's kind of by design. So just roll with me. Is that cool? Yep. All right. We're in 2 Kings chapter 3. We're talking about Elisha. You guys got confused, I'm sure, last week between Elijah and Elisha, right? Because God has a sense of humor. And Elisha was Elijah's protege, but their names were really, really close together, and that's confusing. What we're picking up here is last week Elijah went off to heaven, and what we have now is is really the first time Elisha stands up to lead in any sort of way. That's what we're going to be going through. I want to let you know I am using the 1984 translation of the NIV Bible. All right, so they just updated the translation. It doesn't change the story, but some words are different, right? Because it's translating an ancient text to modern language. So they translate some words differently depending on the year that you use. I'm using the older one because there's like one sentence in the whole thing that's slightly different, but it feeds into the sermon. So you guys, you okay with that? I want to let you know the story's the same from beginning to end. We screwed up. Most of it is us screwing up. Then Jesus comes, tells us we don't have to screw up no more, gives us the Holy Spirit so we don't screw up no more. And then there's this tiny little piece at the end that's prophecy for how things are going to end. The Bible's still the same, all right? There's some translations that are weird. Some have these and thous in them, right? I don't like reading those because I just get caught up on the these and thous and blah, 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 and I can't do it. But then there's this one, it's like a paraphrase called The Message, and the story's still the same, but it sounds like somebody who's really not all that cool trying to sound cool, and it's like really awkward to read, and you're embarrassed for the person that wrote it. That happens sometimes too. The NIV, I love, it's a great one to preach out of. It's usually what we only ever preach out of. I'm just using an older translation. So that's what we got, all right? So 2 Kings chapter 3. We're going to start in verse 1, and we'll keep moving. So Joram, son of Ahab, became king of Israel in Samaria in the 18th year of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. And he reigned 12 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, but not as his father and mother had done. He got rid of the sacred stone of Baal that his father had made. Nevertheless, he clung to the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit. He did not turn away from them. So, things you got to know just right up front, all right? Joram is son of Ahab. Ahab was a king of Israel. Okay, so actually, let me go back. Israel, you have Israel and Judah. Those are the two nations that are just mentioned here, right? The way this works is, for a good chunk of the Old Testament, the nation of Israel, right, it's together. It's led by Moses, it's led by Joshua, it's led by the judges, and it's led by King Saul, King David, and King Solomon, all right? And then after Solomon, what happens is it splits. They have a split. And so when it splits, what happens is these two kingdoms take two very different tracks. The kingdom of Israel, which is 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel, becomes very pagan, and it doesn't go well. And when you read through the Old Testament, what you actually find is that the kingdom of Israel is overtaken by enemies faster than the kingdom of Judah because they weren't righteous and they screwed up a lot. All right. And then you have the kingdom of Judah, and they had a few really, really good kings. Jehoshaphat is one of those really good kings, and the kingdom of Judah is able to keep going. So same people group, right? Two different kingdoms. You tracking with me? Now, it's important that Joram is the son of Ahab and Jezebel, because that's going to come up later in the story. Ahab was a terrible king. He was a pagan, worshiped Baal, the sacred stone of Baal. He worshiped Baal, which had a lot of really weird rituals, and it was bad, right? It was a fertility god, so you can fill in the blanks. You're welcome. You know, the other thing that you got to remember is Jezebel was totally awful. She was really the crux of the mistakes that were made. She was the one who was kind of manipulating is probably too strong a word, but she had much power over Ahab and therefore much power over the kingdom. And she's the one that wanted to kill Elijah, and she's just an awful person. That's why nobody in this room is probably named Jezebel, right? You don't walk around and meet Jezebels very often. I'm just saying, you know. But you meet plenty of Marys and Deborahs and Ruths and Esthers, right? No Jezebels. There's a guy in the Bible named Nimrod. You don't meet many of those either. But that's a whole other thing. So just keep moving. Verse 4. Now Misha, king of Moab, raised sheep, and he had to supply the kingdom of Israel with 100,000 lambs and with the wool of 100,000 rams. After Ahab died, the king of Moab rebelled against the king of Israel. So at that time, King Joram set out from Samaria and mobilized all of Israel. He also sent this message to Jehoshaphat, king of Judah: the king of Moab has rebelled against me. Will you go with me to fight against Moab? I will go with you, he replied. I am as you are, my people as your people, my horses as your horses. By what route shall we attack, he asked. Through the desert of Edom, he answered. Bad idea? You realize they're walking. It's a desert. Just a little foreshadowing for you, all right? All right, we'll keep moving. So the king of Israel set out with the king of Judah and the king of Edom after a roundabout march of 7 days. Can I tell you something? I've never marched in my life. But I know one thing. Roundabout is the worst way to do it. Fair enough? All right. 7 days walking around in circles. The army had no more water for themselves or for the animals with them. What, exclaimed the king of Israel, has the Lord called us 3 kings together only to hand us over to Moab? All right, this is free, so take it for what it's worth. You don't have to write it down. Did God ever tell the king of Israel to do anything in this story yet. Not at all. When you don't know God, you don't know what he's telling you. I'm just saying. He's blaming God for getting them together to kill him. God hadn't said anything. When you don't know God, you don't know his voice. But Jehoshaphat asked, is there no prophet of the Lord here that we may inquire of the Lord through him? An officer of the king of Israel answered, Elisha, son of Shaphat, is here. He used to pour water on the hands of Elijah. Jehoshaphat said, the word of the Lord is with him. So the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat and the king of Edom went down to him. Elisha said to the king of Israel, what do we have to do with each other? Go to the prophets of your father and the prophets of your mother. You catch that? So Elisha's boss killed all Jezebel's prophets in a little exchange that they had. They had a little like prophet duel. And Elisha killed like 400 prophets. Elijah killed like 400 prophets. Elisha's talking trash. That's what's going on right now. It's the best part of the whole story, actually. Oh, what are you doing here? I don't want to talk to you. Why don't you go talk to all those guys, you big baby? Right? Love it. A little trash talk in the Bible. No, the king of Israel answered, because it was the Lord who called us 3 kings together to hand us over to Moab. And Elisha said, as surely as the Lord Almighty lives, whom I serve, catch that, whom I serve, obviously you don't, whom I serve, if I did not have respect for the presence of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, I would not look at you or even notice you, but now bring me a harp. That's the second best line in the whole story. Now bring me a harp. You just see a guy with like crazy hair, I have an idea. Bring me a harp. All right. I just saw that in comic book form. Look, here's the deal. First point, reputation matters. Reputation matters. So in this story, this is what you have. They get into a bind and Jehoshaphat goes, man, is there a man of God anywhere that we can get some advice from? Is there a man of God anywhere? And they go, well, there's this guy, Elisha, and he used to serve Elijah. They say he used to pour water on the hands of Elijah. So he used to wash Elijah's hands. He used to serve him. So sometimes you can have a good reputation. You don't even earn it, right? Because Jehoshaphat's response is the word of the Lord is with him. Like if he was with Elijah, I'm good. Go get him, right? And then sometimes you can have a bad reputation. Because Elisha's view of Joram, the king of Israel, is, I would just let you die. And by the way, I have zero respect for you at all. And anyway, and so that can happen. Now, on the flip side, you can sometimes not earn your bad reputation. Because on some level, Joram didn't necessarily deserve what Elisha said to him initially. Well, why don't you go talk to the prophets of your father and mother? Because he did tear down the sacred stone of Baal. He did make some changes, right? But reputation matters nonetheless. Whether you earn it or you don't, reputation matters, And this is something from the New Testament I want to share with you. This is, I think, how Paul saw his reputation and how he wanted to take care of it. 2 Corinthians 9, 22 through 23 says, I have become all things to all men, that by all possible means I might save some. I do all this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings. So what Paul's saying here is, for me, I'm going to spend my whole life doing everything I can to reach everybody I can. So the way he starts this passage out is saying, when I'm working with the Jews, I become as a Jew. What he's saying is, when I'm working with the Jews, I try to relate to the Jews. Well, that's pretty easy for Paul. He was a Jew, right? But then he says, when I'm working with the slaves, I try to relate with the slaves because I want them to get saved. When I'm working with the Gentiles, I try to relate with the Gentiles. What he says in this verse, actually, is when I'm working with those not under the law. That would be the Gentiles. That would be pagans. That would be people that kind of do whatever they want. That would be our culture, right? I do whatever I can to relate with them so that I can hopefully reach them. That's the way Paul wants his reputation to be built, that he will do anything for anybody that they may know Jesus, right? I think that's a good way to go. I think that actually jives pretty well with the way that the New Testament lines up, the way that Jesus talks about it, because he has these things that he says, the greatest commandment And the Great Commission, anytime great is before something, you should pay attention if it's in the Bible, right? And so the greatest commandment is love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself, right? And then the Great Commission is, therefore go, make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey the things I have commanded you. Surely I'll be with you to the end of the age. So love God, love people, tell them about Jesus, baptize them, teach them how to live, right? That should be what we're known by. That's what Paul's following. That should be what we're known by. Reputation matters for us, right? And we're not all that great at maintaining it sometimes as Christians, right? Like, we get known for silly things. We're known for silly things, just silly things, right? Like, well, here's a good one. Politics, right? Anybody tired of seeing the signs when you drive in? How come I don't get to litter, but all the politicians do? I don't know. I don't get that. We get known for our politics on either side, right? We get known for our politics. We fight those fights. We get into that stupidity, right? And here's the problem. Maybe there was a time in American history where you could be known for your politics and it wouldn't be divisive. But if your goal, your life purpose, what you want your reputation to be built off of is that I'm actually going to love people, and I'm actually going to love people and try to get them to Jesus, you cannot be known for your politics in this day and age, period. It can't work. It's too polarized. You know, you got a couple hundred people up in D.C. that all have the same job and hate each other. And you're just spouting the craziness they're spouting. You know, you can't be known for that. We get known for, here's a good one in the church. We get known for the rumor mill. I got quiet. Why is it so quiet? We get known for the rumor mill. Every church has a rumor mill. Got the grapevine, you know. You hear things. It gets around. Things get around. You know how I know this church has a rumor mill? I get to see the prayer request cards. That's the spiritual way to tell a rumor. I'm just saying. You know, we get known for things that just aren't. They don't fit our purpose. They don't fit our purpose. Now, how about this? In this case, he's talking about idolatry. The bad reputation that the king of Israel has is over idolatry. That's what Elisha is upset about, right? But Christians can become known for their idolatry. Do you realize that in church circles, there's a whole period in recent American church history that gets called the worship wars? That was when it switched over from hymns to choruses. If we're going to split churches over music, is that not idolatry? You know? Or, this is a better one, maybe a little bit less personal. All right? The Crusades. Multiple times, thousands of men killed thousands of other men at the behest of one man who said he was speaking for God. Is that not idolatry? You know, we get known for those. I spent 2-3 weeks in high school learning about the Crusades. It's the most frustrating time in the world because you can't defend that. But that's not what I believe in either, right? We get known for stupid things. Reputation matters, you know. Reputation matters. Can I tell you why reputation matters so much? Because the largest generation in American history is the millennials. And it's the least amount of millennials, percentage-wise, attend church than any other generation in American history. Reputation matters. We're losing, you know? Reputation matters. I said that like 12 times. You got it, right? You got it? All right. Now I got all off track. I got to find where I stopped. Oh, yeah. I stopped at, now bring me a harpist. All right. While the harpist was playing, the hand of the Lord came upon Elisha, and he said, this is what the Lord says, make this valley full of ditches. Somebody say, dig a ditch. For this is what the Lord says, you will see neither wind nor rain, yet this valley will be filled with water, and you, your cattle, and your animals will drink. This is an easy thing in the eyes of the Lord. He will also hand over Moab to you. He will overthrow every fortified city and every major town. You will cut down every good tree and stop up all the springs and ruin every good field with stones. Second point, buy-in matters. Buy-in matters. So track with me on this, okay? You got 3 armies. You got that so far, right? You got the army of Judah, the army of Israel, and you got the army of Edom. Anytime you try to get 3 organizations together and moving in the same direction, it's complicated, right? That's just complicated. And something that I know to be true is complication always leads to grumpiness. Fair enough? Like you're about to go on vacation, right? And for whatever reason, packing the car for vacation is always too complicated. And then you get grumpy, right? How many people know the first day of vacation is the worst day of vacation? Come on. It's the worst, right? Complication leads to grumpiness. That's not a point, that's just a thought. But it's complicated. So you start out with a complicated situation. And then you go on the worst march ever because it's roundabout for 7 days through a desert. This is a bad situation. It's a bad situation. They're about to start dying of thirst. They're about to be it's about to get real bad. They might turn on each other. This is a bad situation. So what do? Well, we need a man of God to tell us what to do. So the man of God comes up, starts talking trash to one of the kings, okay? Starts talking trash to one of the kings. And then, cherry on top, says, I would almost rather you die, but I like him, so I'm going to help you. All right? And then, finally, God's going to speak, and what does he say? Dig a ditch. This is a bad deal, y'all. It's hot. They're going to be really sweaty. And they don't have water to replenish the water that's leaving their body, but they have to dig ditches. If God doesn't come through, they might actually die faster for digging the ditches. It's a big deal. It's a problem. Make this valley full of ditches. Okay. Right? That's why buy-in matters, because think about this. If they don't dig the ditches, but God sends the water, where does it go? Straight into the ground. They don't have any water. Buy-in matters. You have to be prepared. You have to do the work on the front end. Matthew 7:7, right? This is the verse we use when we want to view God as a vending machine. It says, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you'll find. Knock and the door will be opened, right? That's the God as a vending machine verse. That's somebody tells you they have a need and you go, well, ask and it'll be given. Seek and you'll find, you know? Hey, y'all are with me? Y'all all right? That's the verse we use when we want people to think they can use God for whatever they want. But have you ever thought about this? To ask a question, you have to be prepared with a question, right? You don't just ask nothing. You have to be prepared with a question. There's preparation that goes in on the front end. To seek, you have to be prepared with the destination. And to knock on a door, you have to have been prepared enough to find the door. Buy-in matters. You have to prepare for the miracles that you desire, that you need, that you expect, right? Buy-in matters. And so this happens in life all the time. You know, people come up, they want to pray, and they're like, I have financial needs, I just need to pray. Well, okay. We all have this saying that we use, which is God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. We use it in mission trips all the time because it makes people, when you go on a mission trip, you get real nervous, right? And so inevitably, every mission trip I've ever been on, no matter the church, no matter the pastor, they'll start a prayer during the week. Lord, we know that you don't just call the qualified, you qualify the called, right? And it makes people feel better, and it's true. And we use that, and we use that, and we use that. But there's something else that I think we have to add. God may call the qualified or qualify the called, but he doesn't bless the unprepared. You know, maybe he does. At least the unprepared seldom see the blessing, right? If you have a financial need, and you're paying 20% on credit card debt, right? and God does send you a financial blessing, you don't know. It's gone before you get a chance to even give God credit for it, right? You got to do the work on the front end to receive the blessing. Otherwise, the credit card company is receiving the blessing. You got to do the work on the front end. That's why we talk about 10, 10, 80. You have savings, you give to God, and then you have money to spend, and you keep yourself disciplined in that area. Why? So that when you do have a need and you do pray for the blessing, you can actually receive it, not Visa. You know what I mean? We have VBS coming up, right? And we could sit in here all day we could have sat in here all day every week for the last 3 weeks praying that God would bring so many kids and so many kids would get saved for VBS. And that would have been awesome, except we never would have been prepared for the kids to actually come. So why would God send them? Because they'd show up and we'd have no program for them. You have to do the work on the front end. Buy-in matters. Buy-in matters. The next morning, this is verse 20. The next morning, about the time for offering the sacrifice, there it was, water flowing from the direction of Edom, and the land was filled with water. Now all the Moabites had heard that the kings had come to fight against them, so every man, young and old, who could bear arms was called up and stationed on the border. When they got up early that morning, the sun was shining on the water. To the Moabites across the way, the water looked red like blood. That's blood, they said. Those kings must have fought and slaughtered each other. Now to the plunder. But when the Moabites came to the camp of Israel, the Israelites rose up and fought them until they fled. And the Israelites invaded the land and slaughtered the Moabites. They destroyed the towns, and each man threw a stone on every good field until it was covered. They stopped up all the springs and cut down every good tree. Only Kir Hareseth was left with its stones in place. But men armed with slings surrounded it and attacked it as well. Last point, perspective matters. Perspective matters, right? If you don't see things from God's perspective, his blessings can look like curses, right? So the Moabites, their perspective caused them to see blood, which ultimately led to their destruction. And the Israelites, their perspective caused them to see God's blessing, which ultimately led to their victory, right? This is huge. Perspective matters. So when I basically spent the years of 18 to 22 like failing at everything. Like when I think back on it now, I didn't do very much right. You know, I messed up a lot of things. I went away to college. My first semester, I was on academic probation. My second semester, I had good grades. I had this problem where I didn't handle things well socially. Like, I've never had big issues with like anxiety, but when it came to getting out of my comfort zone socially in a place where I didn't know a whole lot of people or in a place where I was uncomfortable or whatever, I just didn't do well. You know, and you know that when you know you should talk, but the air won't come up into your throat, and like you have words, but the air's not passing over your vocal cords, and you just feel like you're gonna choke. You get what I'm saying? That would happen to me a lot when I was away, and I just didn't handle it well. And so then I decided to come home after that. And then I went away again to another college in South Carolina, and same thing kind of happened. Just didn't handle it all that well socially at first, and then it got better, and then it tanked, and I ended up on academic probation again, flunked out, the whole deal. Just didn't handle myself well socially. I didn't do well. I was unmotivated generally. Sometimes I'd be motivated, sometimes I wouldn't. I really just didn't have direction, and I didn't have a lot of friends, and the friends that I would have, I would end up pushing away or whatever, and it was just 4 years of being paralyzed, stuck in the same spot. I don't know if anybody's ever done that before, but if you have, you kind of get it. You just stuck. Nothing's moving forward. Nothing's going right, and I'm failing at everything. And I've always been pretty honest with myself about my situation. So, you know, I ended up coming back home after being in South Carolina dropping out like 30 credits away from a degree, and kind of looking at myself in the mirror going, okay, you're a failure, like right now, like you've failed at everything, and you have a job now, but you have a job because your daddy knew somebody. Because I got a job at a construction company because my dad knew somebody. It was terrible. And I don't need anybody to feel bad for me or anything like that. I still had an amazing life. I did. I just screwed it all up, all along the way. And when you really unpack it, I think there are a few reasons for it, but one reason that I was in that place is it was of my own making. My dad, I knew I was called into ministry. I knew that was what I was supposed to do, and I didn't want to do it. And it was because my dad, my dad's a pastor. He didn't know. And man, he's really good. Like, I don't know if you understand this because you come here every week, but this is very not normal here. This is extraordinary here. We put in our reports this year, and all of our campuses and online church combined is 5,400 people every week. And there's a list of the top 100 churches in America in terms of attendance, right? And attendance, take it for what it's worth. It's attendance. I'm just giving you church nerd stuff. The lowest, the number 100 was like 6,000 or 6,500 or something. This is very not normal. Now that's a list that everybody, it's not a comprehensive list because you have to turn your statistics in to these people. But what I'm saying is this is not normal. This is extraordinary. This is crazy. This doesn't happen often. And so my dad, if you didn't catch on, my dad's Pastor Mike. And he was really good at it, and I was just, how could I ever stand on the stage and do that? And then how could I ever follow? I'd never add up. And so I stayed stuck in this paralyzed spot. And so here's the thing with that. Looking back on it now, I did fail at everything. There's no redeeming factor to that. But God was holding me in a place, because if I had had success in college, if I had actually done well with it, I could have gone any number of directions, because I was not following God's plan for my life. I didn't really like God for most of college, to be honest with you. I didn't really like my parents for a portion of that time. I didn't really like anybody for a portion of that time either. So had I had success, I could have gone any number of directions, and I was not smart enough to realize I needed to go in the direction God wanted me to go, right? And so God helped me there until I had gained the wisdom through those failures to see what his plan was for me. You see, perspective matters. Looking back on it now, that was one of the greatest blessings of my life. Had I gone and had success in other places and done other things, I probably wouldn't have married my wife. I wouldn't be able to do this. I wouldn't have the amazing life I have now. And had I gone off and done something else, God would have let the greatest failure of my life happen if I had gone off and done something else, because I would have let my father be the stumbling block on my path to God's plan. You see, your bad perspective can sometimes cause the blessings to look like curses. And I was blessed with a great father and a great example. But my bad perspective could have caused him to be a stumbling block for me. And there's somebody here that has somebody like that in their life. And you need to change your perspective. Perspective matters. Perspective matters. So you got 3 lessons through this story, and and putting it all together and unpacking it and figuring it out. What I really believe is this story. It's a story about a miracle, but it's also a story of how God takes one man, Elisha, and uses him to show 2 pagan armies and 2 pagan kings that he is still God of the universe and that he still loves them, right? And the whole Bible is the story of God calling his people back to himself. That's That's what the Old Testament is. That's what that's the New Testament. That's the story. That's the gospel. It's God calling his people back to himself. In the Old Testament, God is calling the Israelites back to himself. In the New Testament, Jesus comes, it's all of us. The script changes and he's calling all of us back to himself. That's it. And all along the way, God uses these ordinary men to do these men and women to do these extraordinary things. And he does that, and then it keeps going. At Jesus, history changes. I don't know if you've thought about this, but at the cross, history changes. And I don't just mean religiously, I mean history. There's not a single historian on the face of this planet that can't say that Jesus of Nazareth, his life is a turning point in history, right? And everything changes here. So after that, the Bible, it ends at Revelation. And so there's all these people that have gone through and built the church and been a part of God's plan that did amazing things that were never written about as well. Here's the thing. I want to be one of those people. I think we should all want to be one of those people. We want to do the amazing things that God has in store. We want to do things that we haven't even dreamed of because God's smarter than we are, right? And so the whole thing with this sermon is these 3 lessons, while they're not the only lessons you'll ever learn along the way, they're a good starting place. Reputation matters. If I want to make a difference, people need to know that all I'm about is my God and them, right? If I want to be one of those world changers, buy-in matters. People have to know that I've put sweat and blood into what I believe. And God needs to know that I'm prepared for the miracles I'm begging for. And perspective matters, because if you can't see things through God's perspective, his blessings can come off like curses and you can break things. You can screw it all up because your perspective is wrong. If you can see things through God's eyes, you can see amazing, the blessings in front of you. And so we need to learn these 3 things along with a ton of other things, but we need to learn these 3 things because we're called to so much more. We're called to so much more. You realize Billy Graham died a few months ago. You realize he was a poor farm boy from Charlotte, North Carolina, right? How many of y'all by society standards are better and smarter than a poor farm boy from North Carolina? I'm just saying, God can do anything with anybody. There's so much more in his plan for us. Things that we haven't even dreamed of. And so we need to be aware and be mindful of our reputations. We need to be bought in. We need to beg God for his perspective. Let me pray for you. God, I thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this family. We get to do this together, and God, I pray that you would make us all stronger together than we are separate, and that we would all work together towards becoming the men and women that you've created us to be. And ultimately, God, we'd see a significant impact on our community because we followed you and because we work together here in this time, in this place. Lord, I thank you for the opportunity to do the amazing things that you've allowed this church to do so far. And I thank you for the plans that we haven't even thought of yet that you have in store. God, this is a beautiful place to be. And this is a beautiful time to be here. I just pray that you'd set a fire in each one of us that would just burn and burn and burn until we've become the men and women you've created us to be, and until we've done the things that you created us to do. And Lord, I pray that we would have perspective that's from you. And I pray that we would see the blessings in our lives the way that you intended us to see them. We love you. We thank you. Amen.